In 1939, an unusual expedition led by German archaeologist and writer Edmund Kiss arrived in Bolivia. This was no ordinary scholarly venture. Kiss was backed by Heinrich Himmler, a high-ranking Nazi official known for his obsession with occultism and mysticism. Himmler had established the Ahnenerbe, or the Ancestral Heritage Research and Teaching Society, within Nazi Germany's SS organization. Founded in 1935, the Ahnenerbe's work revolved around proving the existence of a superior Aryan race, which they claimed once existed and had left indelible traces across the world in the form of magnificent monuments and structures, together with lost ancient artifacts possessing advanced technologies. They sought to link the contemporary German people to this prehistoric civilization by sending numerous expeditions to prehistoric sites and studying them. In this way, the Ahnenerbe aimed to bolster Nazi ideology by giving it a supposedly scientific basis. Though relatively unknown compared to the Ahnenerbe's better-documented Tibetan expeditions, the expedition to Tiwanaku reflected the same ideological motivations. By uncovering an ancient advanced civilization that they could claim as a precursor to the Aryan race, Himmler and his followers hoped to reinforce the Nazi narrative of an ancestral Aryan lineage that predates all other civilizations. Tiwanaku's impressive ruins, located near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, seemed ideal for such an endeavor. One of the most striking aspects of Tiwanaku is the sheer scale and precision of its stone structures. Massive blocks, some weighing up to 130 tons, were used in the construction of temples, gateways, and monolithic sculptures. These stones are not only extraordinarily large, but are also fitted together with a precision that defies explanation using simple tools. For instance, the Pumapunku complex within Tiwanaku is built with giant blocks of andesite and red sandstone that are carved with intricate details, precise cuts, and interlocking joints. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding the stonework is the absence of tool marks. Mainstream archaeologists propose that the Tiwanaku civilization may have used stone tools and wooden sledges, yet the level of precision and polish achieved on the stones would seem impossible to achieve with such rudimentary techniques.
The facing stones of this site are perfectly set with no mortar. We took a needle, and that needle we tried to insert at every point along the joint, and the needle couldn't be inserted. A perfect cut.
Furthermore, some of the stones at Pumapunku exhibit precision-drilled holes and complex angled cuts that resemble the type of engineering seen in modern construction, leading some to speculate that the builders may have had access to an advanced form of technology, one that left no trace and whose techniques were subsequently lost. Tiwanaku's builders appear to have had a profound understanding of astronomy, as evidenced by the site's alignment with celestial events. The Kalasasaya Temple, a large open-air temple with stone pillars, is aligned to capture the solstices and equinoxes with remarkable accuracy. During the winter solstice, the sun rises between specific pillars, and the design of the complex suggests a deliberate orientation to celestial bodies. This knowledge of astronomy would have been crucial for agricultural cycles, and it indicates a high level of observational skill and mathematical understanding on the part of the builders. Adding to the mystery is the idea that these alignments may point to a much earlier construction date. Some researchers, examining astronomical data, suggest that the alignment of the structures at Tiwanaku is accurate for a much earlier period, perhaps as far back as 15,000 years ago.
The only correction that I would make is that we now have better astronomical measurements due to satellites and computers. And I would suspect the date would be more like 12,000 years ago. But that still makes Tiwanaku the oldest city known.
This theory, while controversial, has led some to argue that Tiwanaku may have been built by an unknown prehistoric civilization with a sophisticated understanding of both engineering and the cosmos. If true, this would radically alter our understanding of the development of advanced cultures in the Americas. One of the legends surrounding Tiwanaku is that it was destroyed by a great flood, an idea supported by local indigenous folklore that speaks of a cataclysmic event wiping out its original inhabitants. This narrative is echoed in many ancient cultures around the world, where stories of global floods appear in mythologies from Mesopotamia to India to the Americas. Some researchers have linked these flood myths to the end of the last ice age, approximately 12,000 years ago, when melting glaciers would have caused sudden and drastic changes in sea levels and weather patterns worldwide. Geological studies around Lake Titicaca provide some support for this theory. Evidence of drastic water level changes in the lake basin suggests that Tiwanaku may have been submerged at some point in its history. Additionally, the presence of marine fossils around the site has fueled speculation that the region may have experienced a significant flooding event that could date back to the end of the Ice Age. If Tiwanaku was indeed impacted by this flood, it would suggest that the site predates its conventional dating and might have been built by an earlier, possibly forgotten civilization. Many of Tiwanaku's structures defy explanation in terms of their purpose. The Gateway of the Sun, a massive stone archway adorned with complex carvings, features a central deity figure surrounded by 48 winged figures. The exact meaning of these carvings remains unknown, though they are often interpreted as a representation of a sun god or central cosmological figure. The symbolism embedded in the carving suggests that the people of Tiwanaku had a highly developed religious or spiritual belief system, possibly connected to an advanced understanding of cosmology. The purpose of Pumapunku is equally mysterious. Unlike other temples and ceremonial spaces, Pumapunku does not have a clearly identifiable layout or function. Some researchers believe it could have been a religious or ceremonial site, while others propose it might have served as an observatory or center of knowledge. The complexity and scale of the construction suggests that the builders had a specific, perhaps esoteric purpose in mind, yet this purpose remains speculative, leading some to argue that the structure could be a relic of a prehistoric civilization with lost knowledge. To this day, Tiwanaku remains a site shrouded in mystery, with few definitive answers to the questions it poses. Mainstream archaeology continues to explore the site, yet the evidence of high-precision engineering, complex astronomical alignments, and possible connections to ancient flood myths keep alternative theories alive. The Nazis in the early 20th century, particularly Edmund Kiss, would use all of these unexplained mysteries and fascinating feats of ancient archaeology to fuel their ideological agenda, attempting to frame Tiwanaku as evidence of an ancient Aryan civilization that had once spanned the globe. Edmund Kiss was chosen to lead a special expedition to Tiwanaku due to his background in archaeology mixed with his deep interest in esoteric theories. Before Tiwanaku, he had published several works suggesting that an advanced, ancient civilization might have existed long before recorded history, establishing the foundations for future societies. He became intrigued by Tiwanaku after visiting the site years earlier and theorized that it might be the remnants of a lost super-civilization, possibly linked to the legendary Atlantis, which he associated with Aryan origins. He theorized that this ancient, advanced society had migrated to South America long before the rise of the Inca, establishing cities and imparting knowledge to local populations. Tiwanaku had captivated Western explorers since 1549, when a group of Spanish conquistadors stumbled upon the ruins high in the Andes. Towering stone gateways, massive granite monoliths, sprawling earthworks, intricately carved stelae, and enigmatic glyphs left the Spaniards in awe. When they inquired about the origins of these ruins and the fate of the civilization behind them, local indigenous caciques or lords explained that they belonged to an ancient time and that the original inhabitants had been wiped out by a great flood. The site's obvious antiquity and uncertain origins made Tiwanaku one of archaeology's great enigmas. In the 19th century, European naturalists flocked to the ruins, offering theories about the civilization that had built these monumental structures. Yet, they universally dismissed the possibility that the ancestors of the Aymara people around Lake Titicaca could have achieved such architectural grandeur. But if the native Andeans hadn't built Tiwanaku, then who could have? When Kiss first visited Tiwanaku in the 1920s, he encountered a scene that seemed isolated, mysterious, and ancient beyond measure. The ruins' architecture, with its massive stone blocks and intricate carvings, fueled his belief that the site was not only ancient, but the work of a pre-Inca civilization. Kiss went so far as to claim that Tiwanaku had been built by Nordic Aryans over 1 million years ago, a timeline that defied geological and archaeological evidence. Kiss's work on Tiwanaku blurred the line between science and mysticism. He asserted that the civilization which had built Tiwanaku possessed advanced technologies, perhaps even beyond those of the present, based on his interpretations of the site's architectural and astronomical alignments. He claimed, for instance, that the construction techniques employed at Tiwanaku were impossible for the indigenous population, and instead suggested some form of ancient super technology existed. Kiss posited that these Aryans had harnessed unknown energies, or even had access to advanced engineering techniques, which he linked to mysticism and esoteric knowledge. Though Kiss's Atlantis theory may sound peculiar, it was surprisingly not unique. For decades, Bolivians too had entertained ideas of Atlantean ancestry, often for reasons similar to Kiss's. A connection to Atlantis offered Bolivia's European descendant aristocracy a narrative of elevated origins, the same appeal that attracted Nazi interest. This link to a mythical past served as their own Garden of Eden and perpetuated the ideology of white supremacy. While Edmund Kiss and Heinrich Himmler are often cited as key figures in the Nazi interest in Tiwanaku, the foundation for their theories was actually laid by Bolivian intellectuals like Belisario Diaz Romero and Austrian Bolivian archaeologist Arthur Posnansky. Their interpretations, combined with Kiss's German ethnic nationalism and Nazi occult beliefs, generated a pseudo-scientific foundation for the proposed expedition. Archaeological research conducted by Wendell Bennett in the 1930s, as well as subsequent radiocarbon dating, indicated that the Tiwanaku civilization emerged as early as 300 BCE, reaching its peak between 600 and 800 AD. Scholars generally agree today that the ancestors of the Aymara-speaking people who populate the Lake Titicaca Basin were the builders of Tiwanaku. This conclusion, however, was met with skepticism in early 20th century Bolivia, where European-descended elites like Belisario Diaz Romero dismissed the idea that indigenous Andean cultures could have built such an impressive city. Born into a wealthy family in La Paz in 1870, Diaz Romero was a polymath, physician, historian, and member of Bolivia's intellectual elite. He adhered to the polygenic theories popular among European scientists of the era, which posited that different races had separate origins. Diaz theorized that Tiwanaku had been built not by Andean ancestors, but by a lost Homo Atlanticus, an ancient Aryan race that he believed had migrated from Atlantis. He argued that this superior white race settled in the Bolivian Altiplano, where they constructed the monumental architecture of Tiwanaku. To Diaz, the indigenous Aymara and Quechua populations in Bolivia were descended from Homo Atlaicus, whom he depicted as Asian-origin barbarians that arrived later and took over Tiwanaku after the original Aryans vanished. Diaz's ideas, although pseudo-scientific, gained traction among Bolivia's European-descended elite, who were invested in maintaining social and racial hierarchies that positioned indigenous people as inferior. His theories offered an explanation for the apparent contrast between the grandeur of Tiwanaku and Bolivia's contemporary indigenous populations, aligning conveniently with Creole beliefs in their own racial and cultural superiority. While Diaz laid the ideological groundwork for Tiwanaku's interpretation as a lost Aryan city, it was Arthur Posnansky who turned Tiwanaku into a personal, lifelong obsession. Born in Austria, Posnansky moved to Bolivia in 1903 and spent decades studying Tiwanaku, publishing extensively on the site in multiple languages. His theories blended speculative archaeology with elements of the Atlantis myth, arguing that Tiwanaku was built by a lost civilization that predated the Andean cultures. Posnansky's ideas reached Europe, where they were picked up by figures like Edmund Kiss. Kiss was influenced by Posnansky's writings and by the racial theories of the day, which suggested that the great civilizations of the past had been built by Aryan progenitors. In Kiss's interpretation, Tiwanaku was a remnant of an ancient Nordic civilization that survived a global cataclysm described by his theory of glacial cosmology. According to this theory, a moon had once collided with Earth, resulting in an ice age that covered the world with glaciers and destroyed Atlantis. Kiss believed that some survivors from this Nordic civilization took refuge in the Andes, where they built Tiwanaku. Edmund Kiss studied Tiwanaku extensively, meticulously surveying the ruins, measuring the positions of the structures relative to celestial bodies, and examining skulls in the basement of the National Museum, convinced that Tiwanaku was a Nordic city. His findings, later published in Germany, claimed that the works of art and architectural style were not of Indian origin but were likely the creations of Nordic men, who had brought a special civilization to the Andean highlands. Kiss's research was successful in Germany, where his theories were seized upon by Nazi officials eager to establish Aryan heritage in places far from Europe. The Gate of the Sun, one of the most iconic monuments at Tiwanaku, received particular attention from Kiss and his team. The structure is adorned with elaborate carvings and a central figure often interpreted as the Andean creator god Viracocha. Kiss, however, insisted that the imagery represented an ancient Aryan iconography. He argued that the central figure, rather than being a local deity, was a symbol of an Aryan god-king or high priest from a lost civilization. The intricate carvings on the gate were reinterpreted by the Nazis to fit their narrative, suggesting that the symbols represented a coded language that contained lost knowledge traced back to Aryan origins. Here, we can see Edmund Kiss's hypothetical reconstructions of Tiwanaku from his book The Glass Sea from 1930. Edmund Kiss's theories extended beyond terrestrial archaeology and racial ideologies, He was also fascinated by cosmology and proposed elaborate ideas about the moon and its relation to ancient civilizations. These theories, developed in his later works, were part of a broader pseudo-scientific narrative in which Kiss combined speculative history, mysticism, and a fascination with celestial bodies. His views on the moon reflected his broader agenda of linking cosmic forces to Aryan heritage and ancient civilizations, ideas that resonated with Nazi esoteric circles, especially with Heinrich Himmler and the SS, who were drawn to theories linking the cosmos and racial mysticism. Kiss saw the moon's role as central to the cycles of civilization and destruction, which he believed shaped human history. In his view, each ancient civilization, including Atlantis, which he claimed was founded by Aryan ancestors, had been destroyed by the catastrophic effects of these successive moons. This belief aligned with his broader idea of a lost Aryan civilization that rose and fell due to cosmic and earthly upheavals. For Kiss, these cycles of destruction were part of a divine cosmic order, with Aryan peoples as the chosen inheritors of knowledge that survived each cataclysm. In this framework, the supposed destruction of Atlantis was linked to the disintegration of an earlier moon, which Kiss argued had caused floods, earthquakes, and dramatic climate shifts that decimated the Atlantean civilization. He believed that remnants of this knowledge had survived in other Aryan-descended cultures, which then rebuilt civilization. This idea aligned with his belief in racial superiority, framing Aryans as the resilient, chosen people who preserved ancient wisdom across multiple cataclysmic events. Kiss's theories on the moon were influenced by the work of Hans Herbiger, an Austrian engineer who developed the Welteislehre, or world ice theory, in the early 20th century. Herbiger's theory proposed that ice played a fundamental role in the formation of the universe, with celestial bodies, including planets and moons, interacting through cataclysmic ice-related events. According to Herbiger, these cosmic events influenced life on Earth and shaped human civilizations. Although this theory was pseudo-scientific and unsupported by empirical evidence, it gained popularity within Himmler's Ahnenerbe organization, as the German nationalist and mystical circles interpreted it as an alternative to mainstream scientific cosmology, often labeled Jewish by its detractors. With the backing of Heinrich Himmler and the SS, Ahnenerbe researchers, including Edmund Kiss, were dispatched across Europe and even as far as Asia to collect evidence supporting the world ice theory, with the expeditions being known as the Search for the Ice Moon Fragments. The 1936 Moon Fragment Expedition was one of their more esoteric projects, aimed at recovering what they believed were physical remnants of a former lunar body that could support Herbiger's world ice theory. The expedition team, composed of SS officers, scientists, and researchers loyal to the Ahnenerbe, set out with specific instructions to locate geological or meteorite-like formations that could be interpreted as remnants of an ancient lunar body. They focused their search on areas in the Austrian Alps, the Bavarian forests, and other remote locations across Central Europe where strange rock formations had previously been found. These formations, some of which appeared out of place geologically, were thought to potentially be fragments from an ancient moon. The researchers documented any unusual rock formations, meteorite deposits, and distinctive geological layers that might contain high levels of specific elements such as iridium that could hint at an extraterrestrial origin. At the end, the Moon Fragment Expedition ultimately failed to produce any conclusive evidence of Herbiger's theories. The samples collected, strange rock formations, meteorites, and geological anomalies, were examined but found to be of terrestrial origin or to lack the unique characteristics that would distinguish them as fragments of a shattered lunar body. Without the scientific rigor or methodology of legitimate geologists, the Ahnenerbe researchers could not substantiate their findings, and the quest for moon fragments was quietly abandoned by the SS. Nevertheless, inspired by Herbiger's ideas, Kiss developed his own theories about the moon, imagining it not as a stable celestial body, but as one of a series of moons that had orbited Earth over the millennia. According to Kiss, these moons periodically collided with Earth or disintegrated, leading to massive geological upheavals and cataclysms that wiped out ancient civilizations. In this narrative, the current moon was merely the latest in a line of satellites, each of which had exerted its influence on Earth's history and had an impact on human civilization. Edmund Kiss was also part of two additional expeditions: a quest for giant skeletons in Tanganyika, present-day Tanzania, and a 1939 journey to Libya in search of the mythical city of Zerzura, believed by some to be the ancient abode of jinn or spirits. Nazis were enthralled with the idea that giants could provide physical proof of Aryan greatness, particularly if remains could be linked to mythology or ancient texts describing heroic or semi-divine figures. For Kiss and the Ahnenerbe, the SS organization focused on tracing Germanic and Aryan ancestry. Africa seemed a promising destination, not because of any archaeological foundation, but because of its relative mystery and distance from Europe. Tales of giant skeletons occasionally circulated in colonial accounts, and Kiss was sent to Tanganyika under the hope that he might uncover remains that could be used to substantiate Nazi myths. In Tanganyika, Kiss and his team were tasked with exploring remote areas and documenting unusual fossils or skeletons that might align with legends of ancient giants. They hoped to find skeletal remains of substantial size that they could claim as evidence of an ancient Aryan presence or influence. Kiss relied on local rumors and indigenous stories that spoke of tall ancestors or semi-mythical beings, interpreting these legends through a racialized lens that assumed any evidence of giants would support his theories of Aryan dominance. In his notes, Kiss expressed excitement when local guides spoke of large bones or fossils, though most of these were later identified as animal remains or naturally occurring rock formations. Despite exhaustive searching, the expedition yielded no human remains that could convincingly be classified as giant skeletons, nor did Kiss find any evidence of a prehistoric Aryan presence. However, the expedition was still celebrated by the Nazi press upon Kiss's return, with reports that exaggerated the findings and implied that traces of giants had been found, even though nothing substantial was ever revealed. In 1939, as World War II loomed, Kiss joined an expedition to the Libyan desert in search of Zerzura, a mythical lost city that had captured the imagination of explorers for centuries. Zerzura was often described as an oasis city hidden deep in the desert, filled with treasures and rumored to be inhabited by jinn, supernatural beings in Islamic folklore. Some accounts even spoke of it as a city of white people who held powerful knowledge, which tantalized Kiss and the Ahnenerbe with the possibility that Zerzura might be an ancient Aryan outpost or a repository of arcane wisdom linked to their supposed ancestral past. Zerzura first gained popular attention in the Middle Ages through Arab chronicles and the lore of desert nomads, and in the early 20th century, European explorers fueled further fascination by attempting to locate the city. The Libyan desert, with its harsh conditions and unexplored expanses, had thwarted previous attempts to find Zerzura. However, the Nazis, inspired by a potent combination of myth and racial ideology, decided to fund their own quest. Kiss was selected as part of the Ahnenerbe team because of his interest in ancient civilizations and his willingness to interpret archaeological findings in ways that aligned with Nazi beliefs. The 1939 Zerzura Expedition was logistically challenging as the team faced extreme desert conditions with intense heat and scarce water supplies. Using accounts from earlier explorers, local Bedouin guides, and regional maps, Kiss and his colleagues set out to find the fabled city, hoping that they might uncover artifacts or even writings that could link Zerzura to ancient Aryan or Nordic myths. Some within the Ahnenerbe believed that if Zerzura were real, it might contain lost knowledge or objects of mystical power, possibly even artifacts with magical properties or advanced knowledge that the Nazis could exploit for their wartime objectives. The team scoured the desert, finding scattered ruins, ancient rock carvings, and traces of ancient trade routes, but none of these led to the mythical city of Zerzura. At various points, Kiss's team found geological formations and small cave paintings, some depicting animals and human figures. Although these findings added to the region's archaeological record, none of them provided any direct link to Zerzura or the supposed Aryan heritage the Nazis were so eager to validate. The expedition, much like the one in Tanganyika, failed to achieve its primary objective, and Zerzura remained a legend. However, the Nazi regime continued to portray the Zerzura Expedition as a significant, albeit incomplete, accomplishment. Nazi media outlets suggested that the exploration of the Libyan desert was just the beginning, subtly implying that the legendary city was still out there, waiting to be found. Ultimately, the planned expedition to Tiwanaku, which we discussed earlier, was postponed indefinitely when Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, igniting World War II. Kiss, a committed SS officer, was redeployed to support the war effort, eventually commanding military installations until he was captured by Allied forces in 1945. Though Kiss's expedition never materialized, his theories about Tiwanaku as an Aryan settlement continued to be promoted in Nazi propaganda, including publications for the Hitler Youth. After the war, Kiss and his theories were largely discredited, but the myths surrounding Tiwanaku as a lost civilization of non-indigenous origin persisted. The Inner Earth Expeditions. The Nazi regime's fascination with the occult and esoteric knowledge is a well-documented aspect of its broader ideological framework. Central to this fascination was the belief in ancient wisdom and supernatural powers that could potentially be harnessed to further the Nazis' goals of racial supremacy and global domination. The allure of these hidden realms was not merely a product of Nazi superstition, but was deeply embedded in the broader Volkish movements of the time, which glorified ancient Germanic myths and the occult. After World War I, a mysterious, esoteric, and occult group formed in Munich known as the Thule Society. This society played a critical role in the early ideological formation of what would become the Nazi Party. The name Thule comes from Ultima Thule, a mythical northern land in Greek and Roman literature, believed to be the farthest point in the north, a place beyond the borders of the known world. Its name reflected the group's fascination with myths, legends, and the belief in a lost Aryan homeland which they sought to rediscover. While Adolf Hitler himself showed little interest in the occult aspects of Nazi ideology, other high-ranking officials like Heinrich Himmler and Rudolf Hess were deeply influenced by the Thule Society's teachings. Himmler, in particular, would later use these esoteric beliefs to inform the activities of the SS, including the establishment of the Ahnenerbe. While the later Ahnenerbe was influenced by the Thule Society, The Thule Society itself was deeply influenced by the work of Helena Blavatsky, a Russian occultist and the co-founder of the Theosophical Society, an organization established in New York City in 1875. Blavatsky is a central figure in the history of modern esoteric and mystical thought, and her writings have had a lasting influence on the development of Western esoteric traditions. Her complex and often controversial ideas include beliefs about humanity's evolution, lost ancient civilizations, and the existence of an inner Earth civilization known as Agartha. Blavatsky traveled extensively, claiming to have visited various parts of the world, including Tibet, where she said she was instructed by mysterious spiritual masters called the Mahatmas, or Ascended Masters. These Mahatmas told her that throughout human history, there have been numerous advanced civilizations known as root races. One root race, according to the masters, lived in a long-lost continent known as Lemuria, said to have been located in the Indian or Pacific Ocean. The Lemurians had access to arcane powers and knowledge, some of which were preserved by their successors, the Atlanteans. Following the destruction of Atlantis, she posited that the survivors went on to influence the development of future civilizations and also retreated to various secret locations around the globe, including subterranean realms, inaccessible regions deep underground. The later Thule Society studied the work of Helena Blavatsky and also found numerous ancient texts that refer to the existence of such a place. Almost every ancient culture shares legends about interactions with subterranean races. Clearly, some of these are considered to be purgatory for sinners, attempts to deter people from wrongdoing. But other legends, those about Agartha, with its cities, Shambhala and Potala, have striking resemblances, no matter which continent they originate from. In all legends, these civilizations tell of two beings, very tall giants or very advanced reptilian races. The word Agartha is of Buddhist origin. True Buddhists fervently believe in this subterranean empire, which they say has millions of inhabitants and many cities, including the capital Shambhala, where a supreme ruler dwells. They believe the Dalai Lama is his terrestrial representative, and his messages are transmitted to the lamas in Tibet. They believe that they've been there for thousands of years, sheltering humanity since the terrestrial cataclysms. The Russian artist, philosopher, and explorer Nicholas Roerich published that a Tibetan Lama revealed the Tibetan capital was connected by a tunnel with Shambhala, the heart of the subterranean empire of Agartha, and that the entrance of this tunnel was guarded by lamas who were sworn to keep its actual whereabouts a secret from outsiders. Those who are led to this underground passage travel deep into Earth through areas where it becomes so narrow it can be difficult to pass through. In the ancient epic poem, the Mahabharata, the Hindus also spoke of Aryavarta, the abode of the excellent ones, which was said to be ruled by a supernal race, the Nagas, a half-human, half-reptilian species depicted with jeweled hoods that light their realm. It's said the Nagas possessed a cutting-edge technology and had an unpredictable and sometimes merciless nature, known to abduct and torture humans, while at other times influencing positive events on Earth. It's also said they inhabited Potala. Perhaps it's not coincidence, then, that the name of the palace where the lamas guard the tunnel entrances is the Potala Palace. Another Indian epic, the Ramayana, tells the story of the great avatar Rama, a blue-skinned emissary from Agartha who arrived on an air vehicle. These air vehicles were called Vimanas, which means a car or a chariot of the gods, carrying its occupant through the air. Strangely, flying airships have remained a consistent part of all Inner Earth stories. In Africa, A similar tunnel was believed to connect the secret chambers at the base of the Pyramid of Giza with the subterranean world, by which the pharaohs established contact with the gods of the underworld. Ancient Egyptian deities like Ra, Thoth, Anubis had qualities unlike humans: unique height, skin coloring, eyes, often avian or bird-like heads. Another mystery occurred in 985 AD, when the Viking explorer Eric the Red discovered Greenland. By 1410, there was anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000 Viking colonists in Greenland's shores. That was the last date, however, that any one of the Viking settlers of Greenland was ever seen again. All of their villages were found abandoned, and their disappearance has become one of the largest unsolved mysteries in our recent history. That is, unless you ask the native people of Greenland, the Inuits. According to these Eskimos, the white men swarmed suddenly northwards to a wonderland that the natives had long known about. They call it the land of endless summer, rich with vegetation and game. According to their legend, these colonists were lured to a land of eternal bliss inside the protective womb of the earth. In the 12th century, an unusual story of underworld beings showed up in Suffolk, England, and is still a part of the town's history today. The Children of Woolpit. Reapers in the area one day discovered two small children who had skin with a pale green hue and who spoke an unknown language, and though starving, ate only raw beans. The boys soon died, but after many years and acclamation, the surviving girl finally explained that she and her brother had come from a subterranean land where the sun never shone, and where the light was more like twilight, saying they'd become lost when they followed their cattle into a cave, eventually emerging onto the bright landscape. In the 1908 book, The Smoky God, Willis George Emerson tells the story of Olaf Jansson's incredible journey to Agartha and the 2 years he spent living there with his father. Jansson and his father were traveling in their small fishing boat in an attempt to find the land beyond the north wind, when a windstorm carried them through a polar opening into the interior of the earth. There, they met who he called the Elder Race, friendly, intelligent, lanky 12-foot giants. He said later they were able to grow tall in this unique electrical energy field that was always there inside the earth, and that these giants were able to live up to 800 years. Jansson described the inner world as warm, where it rained once a day and was filled with highly charged electrical air. There's a density to the atmosphere, he said, and this is what he believes led to the immense vegetation there. The title of the book, Smoky God, refers to the inner world's glowing and smoky sun. Most interesting was his explanation of these fast, noiseless flying objects on which he rode. He said they had revolving fan-like wheels which destroyed atmospheric pressure, or what he called gravitation, and this force prevented them from falling to one side or the other. After spending 2 years with these beings in Agartha, Olaf and his father attempted to return to the opening. On the journey home, however, his father lost his life when an iceberg destroyed their boat. Jansson was later rescued by some fishermen, but when he shared his incredible story, they placed him in a madhouse for the mentally insane, where, sadly, he remained for 28 years. Not until he was 90 years old did he share the story of his life's journey with Emerson, giving him maps of the interior of the earth, along with the manuscript of his experiences. Around the same time, in 1895, Nobel Prize laureate and Norwegian explorer Dr. Fridtjof Nansen set on an expedition to reach the North Pole. Nansen completely lost his bearings, admitting he couldn't identify the mysterious land which he found, and that lands marked on the map of one of the best-known explorers simply did not exist. He had many unusual things happen, noting that after bitter cold suddenly, the temperature began to rise, and it even became unbearably hot. It was never made clear where Nansen was exactly. But as the expression goes, he was not in Kansas anymore. Deep in the Amazon jungle, the ancient Makushi Indians have remained isolated from advanced civilizations until very recently. They are said to be the guardians of an entrance to inner Earth, and they describe the journey and the beings in vivid detail. They say for 15 days, you must traverse through caverns until balls of bright light and glowing discs appear inside the Earth. There, a civilization of very tall beings, 12 to 15 feet, lives inside a lush ecosystem of vegetation. This primitive culture also describes how they encounter molten rock at deep depths. Without any modern education, how could they know such details unless there is some truth to their story? The Nazis and the Thule Society were well aware of all of these stories and got deeply interested in studying the inner Earth theory. In 1938, under the enigmatic umbrella of Nazi pursuits for mystical artifacts and ancient wisdom, Heinrich Himmler directed a unique expedition that was both scientific and esoteric in its objectives. To this end, he sent a team of Nazi scientists to the remote and mountainous regions of the Himalayas, led by the renowned explorer and zoologist Ernst Schaefer. The Himalayas were not chosen as the expedition's destination by chance. The site was specifically recommended by Hermann Wirth, a scholar of ancient religions and a controversial figure in the study of prehistoric cultures. Wirth held the belief that the dissemination of similar symbols across various global cultures was not coincidental, but rather indicative of a shared origin. He theorized that these symbols were vestiges of an ancient, advanced civilization that had once thrived on the lost continent of Atlantis, purportedly located in the Atlantic Ocean between Portugal and Britain. According to Wirth, the catastrophic sinking of Atlantis devastated its inhabitants, pushing survivors to make solemn vows against the treacherous sea that had swallowed their homeland. In their quest for safety and in accordance with their oath, these Atlantean refugees migrated to regions as geographically disparate as the high plateaus of Tibet. Wirth conjectured that the descendants of these Atlantean survivors preserved their ancestral heritage, reflected in the cultural and religious symbols that echoed those of their drowned civilization. The Nazi expedition to Tibet, therefore, was rooted in a complex web of mythology, pseudoscience, and ideological ambition. Himmler and his associates believed that by tracing and possibly reclaiming ancient relics and knowledge from this lost civilization, they could ensure the supremacy of the Nazi ideology. The Thule Society, on the other hand, also recommended the expedition to Tibet as a quest to find the location of the secret entrance to Agartha. The journey to the Himalayas was arduous and fraught with logistical challenges. The team traversed difficult terrains, from steep, icy slopes to treacherous mountain passes, equipped with the latest technology of the time. Their route took them through remote villages and ancient monasteries, where they conducted ethnographic studies on the local populations, whom they presumed to be descendants of the original Aryan race. The Nazi ideology posited that the pure Aryan lineage had been diluted over the centuries, but preserved in its most authentic form in isolated places like those in Tibet. Schaefer and his team engaged in a variety of anthropometric studies, measuring skull sizes and facial features in an attempt to find physical similarities with the presumed Aryan physiological traits. In addition to anthropological research, the expedition sought to collect cultural artifacts that bore semblances to Aryan symbols from European mythology. They photographed religious texts, icons, and rituals, and took notes on the local customs and languages, drawing parallels wherever they could with ancient Norse and Germanic traditions. These activities were meticulously documented, intended to be used as propaganda to bolster the myth of the Aryan race's widespread historical dominance and esoteric knowledge. Interestingly, while trekking through the most remote regions of the Himalayas, the team encountered monks and shamans that confirmed the tales of a sacred land accessible only to the pure of heart and intention known as Shambhala. Members of the expedition reported various signs and symbols which they encountered in monasteries that they believed were clues to the entrance of Shambhala. However, despite their extensive searches and the collection of a vast amount of data and artifacts, no tangible evidence of an actual entrance to Shambhala was ever found. The expedition did not uncover a physical gateway or map leading to a hidden kingdom. Instead, as the months passed, the expedition collected thousands of specimens and artifacts, which were shipped back to Germany. These items were to be displayed in the Deutsches Ahnenerbe Museum, envisioned as a testament to the global heritage of the Aryan race. Among these were thankas, prayer wheels and texts that the Nazis believed contained encrypted Aryan wisdom waiting to be deciphered by their scholars. Yet, the scientific legitimacy of the expedition was constantly undermined by its ideological underpinnings. The research methodologies were biased, seeking confirmation for preconceived notions rather than conducting objective inquiries. This flawed approach led to selective interpretations of the data, which were used to reinforce the propaganda theories already popular in Nazi circles. Although the expedition did not discover an entrance to the inner Earth, German documents and accounts suggest that such an entrance was located in Antarctica. The Nazi expedition to Antarctica, officially named the Third German Antarctic Expedition, took place from 1938 to 1939. This venture, while ostensibly aimed at expanding scientific horizons, was imbued with the Third Reich's geopolitical ambitions and driven by a desire to establish a German presence in the Antarctic region. This expedition is a compelling episode that illustrates how the Nazis attempted to blend exploration, science, and ideology into a project that was as much about territorial claims as it was about the pursuit of knowledge. The Third German Antarctic Expedition was led by Captain Alfred Richer, a seasoned navigator and pilot who had previously participated in Arctic voyages. The expedition set out aboard the Schwabenland, a German aircraft carrier equipped with 2 Dornier Wal seaplanes. These aircraft were essential for aerial reconnaissance and were used to photograph over 600,000 square kilometers of Antarctic territory, much of which was then claimed under the German flag. The immediate goal of the expedition was to find an area in Antarctica suitable for a German whaling station, as whaling was considered a lucrative industry critical for acquiring whale oil, a key resource at the time for producing margarine and glycerin. Beyond economic interests, the establishment of a whaling station also promised a strategic naval base for Germany. The region's potential for mineral resources was another significant factor, driven by the Third Reich's incessant need for raw materials to fuel its militarization and expansionistic policies. The Schwabenland expedition employed innovative techniques for the time, including aerial photography and state-of-the-art meteorological equipment. The seaplanes launched from the Schwabenland performed multiple flights over areas of Antarctica, dropping darts marked with the swastika into the ice to stake Germany's claim. These areas were named Neuschwabenland or New Swabia. But the Nazis' goals were not limited to just economy and military. In fact, when the German freighter MS Schwabenland embarked on its secret mission to Antarctica, its 33-member team is rumored to include scientists, military experts, construction crews, and key members of the Thule Society, The Thule Society actually believed that there were mystics or channelers who were able to communicate with the highly developed people from this civilization that lived in the Earth's interior. No investigation of inner Earth is complete without the unique story relayed by the pioneering American aviator, Admiral Richard Byrd, Jr., who led numerous expeditions to both poles and wrote detailed logs about his journeys. What stands out about Byrd's story, however, was the personal diary his son published following his death. In this document, he gives vivid details about his expedition to the North Pole in 1947, the geographical anomalies he witnessed which he couldn't make sense of, being met by unfamiliar flying craft which assumed control of his plane, and then literally being taken to their leader, the master of the inner Earth civilization. Before you write this story off, it's important to understand the man who wrote it and to examine his behavior while he was alive. Richard Byrd was one of the most highly decorated officers in military history. Among these was the Medal of Honor, the highest medal given by the United States for valor. He fought for the Allies in both world wars and led 2 huge military expeditions to Antarctica following World War II. He was an efficient, concise leader, and every trip he made, he kept detailed logs of just fact. He was not a poet or a storyteller. The idea a man of this rank and stature would fabricate stories is unimaginable. You only need to see Byrd in his documentaries or read his writings to see that he sought to live with integrity, that he understood the responsibility of his words and choices on the lives of those reporting to him and to the nation that he served. So when Byrd returned from his travels and was interviewed on the Longines chronoscope on live TV in 1954, the hyperbolic statements he made were, and still are, somewhat confusing and mysterious. He said things like, "I'd like to see the land beyond the pole." Now he didn't say to, around, or near it. He called it the land of everlasting mystery, the most peaceful place in the world, and a vast new territory not on any map. He said it was an area as big as the U.S., never seen by a human being, and the most valuable and important place left in the world for science. Prior to another expedition, he said, "This is the most important expedition in the history of the world." And the one he repeated the most was, "It's the center of the great unknown." These are mysterious when you consider that he's referring to either a large mass of ice or a landmass covered with ice. Even if he were speaking of the military significance of this place, to call it peaceful and mysterious are hardly the words of a strategizing military officer. So we must conclude that, as one of the nation's highest-ranking military leaders, he was also sworn to secrecy. These statements raise the question, was Byrd upholding his vow to secrecy for national security, while being just truthful enough to share information that would allow him to abide by his principles of integrity? In February of 1947, Byrd, the one man who has done the most to make the North Pole a known area, made the following statement: "I'd like to see the land beyond the pole, the center of the great unknown." Millions of people read this statement in their newspapers or heard it on the radio broadcast. Did they look at their globes? What land was he talking about? If you look at the map, calculate the distance from all the known lands near it, and none of them are within 200 miles of the pole. In fact, Byrd himself called it an unknown land, and that after 1,700 miles he said he hadn't reached the end of it. He should have been back to civilization, right? But he wasn't. He should have seen nothing but ice-covered ocean, or at the very most, partially open ocean. Instead, he was flying over green, lush areas, including lakes and mountains. It was already published that he had discovered 2 unknown land areas, measuring a total of 4,000 miles across, and yet, Instead of receiving notoriety like Christopher Columbus, his story disappeared. Was Byrd trying to say what he knew without revealing it outright? Was anybody paying attention? To add to this confusion, in 1956, the editor of Flying Saucer magazine, Ray Palmer, wrote a detailed story on Byrd's discoveries. Apparently, however, as the issue headed to press, they mysteriously disappeared, and strangely, the printing plates were found badly damaged, so a reprint couldn't be done. Some other interesting, indisputable facts about the time were that, up to this point, there had been a few books published about the North Pole having entrances into the Earth. Another thing was that Byrd was accused of lying, in effort to receive credit for being the first person to the North Pole, an accusation that seems somewhat inconsistent with a man of his character. Another thing that Byrd shared was that the poles are concave, not convex as thought, and that the South Pole is 10,000 feet high, whereas the North Pole is 10,000 feet low. It was well documented that there was a large spike in temperature as he approached the pole. But one of the biggest mysteries involving Byrd may have happened right after World War II with Operation High Jump. While it was said at the time it was an expedition to Antarctica to find coal and other resources, that story later changed to training military personnel and establishing a research base. In the meantime, you can't help but wonder why either mission would require 33 aircraft, 13 Navy ships, and almost 5,000 soldiers, and mysteriously result in loss of lives. Leaks later revealed that the true mission was to retrieve the missing Nazi leaders from their refuge in Antarctica, but Byrd cut the 8-month mission short after what the Chilean press reported as troubles with many fatalities, though the event was clearly downplayed in the U.S. Following a military-aided evacuation, the force returned. Their stories immediately became classified as top secret, but inevitable leaks revealed that there were attacks by highly advanced saucer-shaped airships. The Secretary of the Navy, by this time, the Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal, started to talk. President Truman forced him to resign, and he was soon taken to Bethesda Naval Hospital's psychiatric ward, where he was prevented from seeing or talking to anyone, including his own wife. When this high-ranking man was found dead, it was ruled a suicide. Case closed. Another strange thing is in 1947, following the sudden end of his military expedition, Byrd spoke with a reporter for the Chilean newspaper El Mercurio and told him that he didn't want to frighten anyone unduly, but that it was a bitter reality that in the case of a new war, the continental U.S. would be attacked by flying objects which could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. This is where Byrd's posthumous diary comes in. Though he remained faithfully silent, albeit mysterious, shortly after his death, his son published his diary to reveal a very different account than what the public had been told. It started like this: "I must write this diary in secrecy and obscurity. It concerns my Arctic flight on the 19th day of February in the year of 1947. There comes a time when the rationality of men must fade into insignificance, and one must accept the unavailability of the truth. I'm not at liberty to disclose the following documentation at this writing. Perhaps it shall never see the light of public scrutiny, but I must do my duty here for all to read one day. Hopefully, the greed and exploitation of certain of mankind can no longer suppress that which is truth." Byrd then continued to unveil a picture that we had not imagined in this diary. He said that he traveled 1,700 miles on this journey, and he was so surprised when ice below gave way to lush green forests, lakes, rivers, and mountains. He saw animal life, and to his dismay, realized he was looking at a large mammoth that resembled those now extinct. He noted that everything had unique and inexplicable color, and suddenly he realized in shock that there was some kind of space vehicles flying beside him. They escorted him, and he saw an entire city and was safely landed despite the fact he had no control over his plane. Once there, he was graciously greeted by civilians, and they called this place Agartha. Bird's dismay upon arrival is clear. He and his crew were then taken to meet what they were told was the ruler of Agartha, the master whom he described as delicate and ancient. They were told they'd been allowed to enter despite these invisible barriers because of his high moral and ethical character. The ruler went on to say that ever since the U.S. had dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, their race had been very concerned for human safety and the survival of the planet. When they intervened, however, their craft had been attacked by our militaries, and Bird was asked to share this message and warning to civilization. Their host then guided them to their plane and back to the outer world. In closing, Bird said he briefed the Pentagon of his message from the master, was interviewed intently by top security forces and a medical team in order to remain silent in regard to all that he learned on behalf of humanity. Incredible is all he could call it. He concluded, "I am reminded that I am a military man and I must obey orders." 10 years later, he wrote a final entry. These last few years elapsed since 1947 have not been kind. I must state that I have faithfully kept this matter secret as directed all these years. It has been completely against my values of moral right. Now, I seem to sense the long night coming on, and this secret will not die with me, but as all truth shall, it will triumph, and so it shall. This can be the only hope for mankind. I have seen the truth, and it has quickened my spirit and has set me free. I have done my duty towards the monstrous military-industrial complex. Now, the long night begins to approach, but there shall be no end. Just as the long night of the Arctic ends, the brilliant sunshine of truth shall come again, and those who are of darkness shall fall in its light. For I have seen that land beyond the pole, that center of the great unknown. Needless to say, this is an extraordinary story from an extraordinary man. Would Bird's own son publish false information that would defame his beloved father? Or did Bird himself falsify all this story in order to make a cruel joke of his life and legacy? Whether or not you believe this story, his influence, moral stature, and valor can hardly be argued. Many state that there's a secret underground Nazi headquarters known as Base 211, located somewhere in the caverns of Antarctica. Interestingly, a German U-boat, commanded by Heinrich Broden, claimed that they had reached the interior of the Earth and even stated that they didn't want to come back, adding, "The Earth is, in fact, hollow." A diagram of Agartha was then drawn by a German scientist in 1935 in corroboration with the U-boat navigator. These stories are backed up by maps made for the National Geographic Society in 1966 by the famous cartographer Heinrich Barron. In that map, Antarctica can be observed without its thick layer of ice, but the most interesting detail on the map is the underwater passageways spanning across the entire continent, which appears to converge at the exact location, identified as the opening into inner Earth. And then there's the disturbing part of this legend, that Hitler and many of his minions escaped Germany in the closing days of World War II and fled to Antarctica, where they escaped into the Earth's interior. For it was after the war the Allies discovered that more than 2,000 scientists from Germany and Italy, along with almost 1 million people, had vanished. This may sound like a fantastical conspiracy theory, and it's understandable if you don't believe in it. However, there was someone who believed in it, the United States. Indeed, it's this belief that perhaps fueled one of the most high-profile military operations in the Antarctic, Operation High Jump. Led by Admiral Richard E. Byrd in 1946, officially the operation aimed to establish the Antarctic Research Base Little America 4, test equipment, and evaluate the U.S. military's readiness for cold weather operations. But could there have been an ulterior motive? The Externsteine. The Externsteine were a series of 3 striking sandstone pillars located in the heart of Germany's Teutoburg forest and have long been shrouded in mystery and legend. Known for their towering presence, these rocks cast long shadows over the ancient landscape, compelling narratives of their historical and cultural significance. While some speculate that these formations served as a prehistoric observatory, others believe they were sacred grounds for ancient Germanic tribes, imbued with spiritual importance that predates recorded history. It was not until the early 20th century that the Externsteine began to attract the attention of a far more ominous force. The Ahnenerbe branch of the SS took a deep interest in the site, believing it to be a megalithic remnant of the ancient historical and cultural heritage of the Aryan race. In 1935, they made the Externsteine became one of the most infamous ancient sites manipulated by the Ahnenerbe. Seizing upon centuries-old legends, Himmler and his team of scholars claimed that the Externsteine stones were once the site of Irminsul. The Irminsul holds a significant place in the lore of Germanic paganism, believed to have been a sacred pillar or monumental tree central to the religious practices and worldview of the Saxons before Christianization. As a sacred object, the Irminsul would likely have served not only a religious and ceremonial role, but also as a symbol of societal order and continuity. It was probably a rallying point for the Saxon tribes since ancient times, when Arminius claimed his glorious victory as he united the Germanic heathen tribes and destroyed 3 Roman legions in the year 9 CE. It was a Saxon symbol that embodied their collective identity and resistance against external forces, particularly during the tumultuous period of Frankish expansion under Charlemagne. It was in the late 8th century, around 772 AD, when Charlemagne destroyed the Irminsul as part of his campaigns to subjugate the Saxon people and enforce Christianization. The annihilation of the Irminsul was a strategic move to dismantle the spiritual and cultural backbone of Saxon resistance against Frankish rule, and to facilitate the integration of the Saxons into the Carolingian Empire. The Saxons from the Middle Ages were a Germanic tribe known for their strength, independence, and resistance to Christianization, and for this they were idealized by the Nazis as ancestors of the Aryan race and as exemplars of racial purity and the warrior spirit. Long before the Nazis took interest in the Externsteine, the site was enveloped in myth and legend. Archaeological evidence suggests that it was used as a sacred place by the prehistoric people who lived in the region. Various carvings and inscriptions indicate that the site held spiritual significance during the Middle Ages, possibly serving as a Christian hermitage or a place of pilgrimage. The most famous relief at the Externsteine, which depicts the descent from the cross, is thought to date back to the 12th century. The Ahnenerbe's mission at the Externsteine was to reclaim the site as a symbol of Aryan spiritual heritage, reinforcing their narrative of an unbroken and pure Germanic lineage. The Nazis contorted the carvings on the rocks to narrate the story of the destruction by Charlemagne and to confirm the site as the real Irminsul. This false narrative became so ingrained that Nazi youth were reported to sing Saxon hymns at the site on Hitler's birthday, further cementing the Externsteine's role in Nazi propaganda. Himmler, obsessed with occultism and the mystical aspects of Aryan supremacy, sponsored archaeological digs and research at the Externsteine to uncover evidence that would link the site to ancient Germanic paganism and, by extension, to the racial theories promoted by the Nazis. The Externsteine was thus woven into the Nazi narrative of racial purity and cultural superiority. It was portrayed as a pre-Christian holy site, a testament to the supposed greatness of the ancient Germanic peoples before the corruption brought by later influences. Propaganda played a crucial role in the Nazis' promotion of the Externsteine as a national monument. The site was featured in Nazi literature, films, and art, which highlighted its dramatic natural beauty and its significance as a link to the Germanic past. School children and Hitler youth groups were taken on trips to the site as part of their indoctrination into Nazi ideology, where the mystical and nationalistic interpretations of its history were emphasized. The Externsteine became a venue for solstice celebrations and other Nazi ceremonies, which were designed to imbue these gatherings with a sense of sacred ritual and connection to the ancestral heritage. These events often blended pseudo-scientific racial theories with romanticized visions of Germanic warrior traditions, thereby deepening the ideological hold on the participants. After the defeat of the Nazis in World War II, the Externsteine, like many other sites co-opted by the regime, underwent a process of denazification, attempting to strip away the layers of Nazi interpretation and rediscover its pre-Nazi historical significance. This included reassessing the archaeological and historical data related to the site, which revealed a rich history of use and significance throughout various historical periods, including its likely role as a Christian hermitage or a place of pilgrimage. Modern archaeologists demonstrated that the true history of the Externsteine is far more complex and mysterious. These ancient rocks, formed over 70 million years ago, have witnessed countless cultural transformations and have been interpreted in myriad ways over the centuries. There are sculptured stone reliefs, stairs, and caves incorporated into the rock formation for thousands of years. Some of the rocks are walkable by steps and bridges. From a scientific point of view, the installations are largely interpreted as relics from the Christian Middle Ages. The largest and most famous of the carvings at Externsteine is a high-relief sculpture shows what appears to be the descent from the Cross of Jesus Christ, a common theme in Christian art depicting Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus taking Christ's body down from the cross, with the presence of Mary, his mother, and Mary Magdalene. The depiction is quite detailed, with figures that convey a deep sense of emotion and reverence, and it dates from the 12th century AD. In addition to the Christian relief, the Externsteine features other carvings and symbols whose meanings are less clear but equally compelling. These include various niches, holes, and smaller figures that might have astronomical significance or be part of older pre-Christian traditions. The interpretation of these markings is challenging. They could represent pagan deities or naturalistic phenomena revered by local tribes before Christianization. Some carvings are thought to be aligned with celestial events, such as solstices and equinoxes, suggesting that the Externsteine might have functioned as a sophisticated astronomical observatory. This interpretation fits with broader patterns in many ancient cultures, which often align their sacred structures with astronomical phenomena to serve both as calendars and as connections to the divine. Today, the Externsteine remains a powerful symbol of natural beauty and historical legacy. It attracts tourists not only for its picturesque setting, but also for its complex history that serves as a poignant reminder of how cultural heritage sites can be manipulated by regimes to serve harmful ideologies. The challenge remains to protect such sites from ideological appropriation and to promote an understanding of their true historical context, ensuring that history's darker chapters do not overshadow the genuine significance of cultural landmarks. The Quest for the Holy Grail. The quest for the Holy Grail, an object steeped in legend as the cup used by Jesus at the Last Supper, has been pursued through centuries by knights, kings, and even modern seekers of mystery.
It seems to have the right kind of powers, too. The legends describe the Grail's healing abilities, and this cup is associated with the very same kinds of miracles. It's said to have raised several people from the dead.
Yet, among the most startling and least expected of these seekers were the Nazis, who in their pursuit of power and dominion over the world turned to the most enigmatic relics of religious and historical significance. The story of their quest is as bizarre as it is chilling, revealing the depths of their obsession with Aryan supremacy and the occult. Himmler was captivated by the mystical and believed fervently that the spiritual destiny of the Germanic race was linked to the recovery of ancient relics. He believed that the possession of the Holy Grail would not only affirm the Nazi ideological myth of Aryan cultural and racial heritage, but also bestow supernatural power to achieve victory in the looming conflicts of World War II. Otto Rahn, a figure shrouded in both historical mystique and dark notoriety, was a German medievalist whose life story intertwined with the lore of the Holy Grail and the twisted ideologies of the Nazi regime. Born in 1904 in Michelstadt, Germany, Rahn's intellectual journey began with a passionate interest in the legends, myths, and folklore of medieval Europe. This fascination set him on a path that would eventually lead to his involvement with one of the most infamous organizations in history, the SS. Rahn's academic pursuits focused on the Cathars, a medieval Christian sect that flourished in the 12th to 14th centuries in what is now southern France. The Cathars were known for their stark opposition to the Catholic Church, which they viewed as corrupt and materialistic. The Cathars even believed that the God of the New Testament and the God of the Old Testament were separate entities, the latter sinful and the former good. The brutal response of the Church culminated in the Albigensian Crusade, which sought to exterminate the Cathar heresy. Rahn was captivated by the story of the Cathars, particularly their rumored association with the Holy Grail, which he speculated might have been protected by them against the corruption of the Catholic Church. His book, Crusade Against the Grail, published in the early 1930s, explored these themes and argued that the Cathars might have been guardians of the Grail. The book caught the attention of Heinrich Himmler, who was similarly fascinated with fabled mythical artifacts. After all, Himmler was funding similar expeditions in search of the Hammer of Thor, which he believed was an ancient weapon made with sophisticated technology lost in time. This legendary weapon, which belonged to the Norse god Thor, was reputed to possess immense destructive power and the ability to bring victory in battle. Believing that the Hammer of Thor could serve as a powerful symbol of renewed Germanic might, Himmler sponsored archaeological expeditions across Scandinavia and parts of Germany where Norse gods had been worshipped. Himmler was so impressed by Rahn's work that he invited him to join the SS and funded his research, enabling Rahn to conduct expeditions in the Pyrenees and other locations in Europe to search for the Grail. Despite his initial enthusiasm, Rahn's relationship with the SS was fraught with personal and ethical conflicts. As a scholar, he was more interested in the mysticism and romantic aspects of medieval history than in the brutal racial ideology of the Nazis. Moreover, rumors about Rahn's homosexuality, which was rigorously condemned under Nazi laws, made his position precarious within the SS's strictly homophobic ranks. Despite all that, Rahn agreed to set out on the expedition in search of the Holy Grail. The decision was not made lightly. It was born out of a complex web of personal ambition, ideological pressure, and the incessant drive to validate his life's work on the Cathars and their legendary secrets. The year was 1936, and Ron embarked on his journey that would take him across the old Cathar strongholds in southern France, an area riddled with castles, hidden caves, and forgotten ruins. As they moved through the Languedoc region, the expedition employed both conventional research methods and more esoteric practices. Ron, always the romantic, often found himself at odds with the more pragmatic and sinister elements within the group. While he sought signs of ancient wisdom and spiritual transcendence, his companions' motivations were grounded in the acquisition of power. The dichotomy between Ron's idealistic pursuits and the SS's agenda was stark, highlighting a fundamental misalignment in their goals. Ron's journey was marked by moments of both revelation and disillusionment. The deeper the expedition ventured into the Pyrenees, the more elusive the Grail seemed to become. A major Cathar stronghold was Montségur, a remote fortress in southwestern France. This became the site of a dramatic confrontation between the Cathars and French royal forces in 1243. Thousands of French troops besieged the fortress for 9 long and grueling months before the people inside eventually surrendered. Hundreds of Cathars were burnt alive in a bonfire after refusing to renounce their blasphemous beliefs. However, it's believed that a number of Cathars managed to smuggle themselves out of the fortress, undetected before their brethren surrendered. It's been speculated that these survivors of the siege took a great treasure with them, many believing it to be the Holy Grail itself, brought back to Europe from the Holy Land by the Templars or other crusaders. Otto Rahn, prompted by previous occultists and mystics, identified Montségur with the Monsalvat Grail Castle of Parzival. Parzival is a medieval German epic poem written by Wolfram von Eschenbach around 1200 to 1210. Eschenbach's poem is one of the most significant early references to the Grail in European literature, depicting the Arthurian knight Parzival's quest to find the Grail, a journey fraught with moral and spiritual challenges. The specific association of Montserrat as Monsalvat likely stemmed from a combination of the mountain's mystical appearance and the legends surrounding it. Monserrat has been a site of religious significance for centuries, with its monastery and the presence of the Black Madonna statue, which itself is shrouded in legend. Its dramatic cliffs and peculiar rock formations give it an otherworldly aura that could easily be imagined as a mythical Grail castle. In his travels to Montserrat, Ron was likely driven by a mix of genuine scholarly intrigue and a need to fulfill the ideological expectations of his SS sponsors. The mountain's spiritual history as a site of pilgrimage and its natural fortress-like appearance would have appealed to Ron's romantic and mystical sensibilities. The search at Montserrat involved rigorous hikes, detailed examination of the geology, and extensive consultations with local religious scholars and historians. Ron's team made several finds during their exploration, mostly medieval artifacts like coins, pottery, and fragments of manuscripts. While these items were historically valuable, none bore any direct relation to the Grail. The lack of significant findings was a disappointment to Ron, who had hoped to uncover evidence that would link Montserrat directly to the Grail legends as described in the tales of Parzival. The end of the expedition was marked not by triumphant discovery, but by a quiet retreat. Ron's report to his superiors in the SS was subdued. He framed the expedition as a valuable cultural exploration that yielded insights into the religious practices and historical artifacts of the region, but he could not claim any success in finding the Grail. In the aftermath, Ron's relationship with the SS grew strained. His homosexuality, already a dangerous secret in the oppressive regime, and his inability to fulfill the grandiose expectations of the Nazi leadership contributed to his eventual resignation and withdrawal from the public eye. The failed expedition to Monserrat, coupled with personal and ideological conflicts, led to a deep personal crisis for Rahn, culminating in his mysterious death. He died in 1939 when his body was found in the snowy landscapes of the Austrian Alps near Kufstein. The circumstances surrounding Otto Rahn's death were mysterious and remain the subject of speculation and intrigue. Officially recorded as death by exposure, many believe it was a suicide, a tragic conclusion to his disillusionment and despair, both personally and professionally. Other theories suggest darker scenarios, including the possibility that he was murdered by the SS due to his failure to produce results and his increasing reluctance to support the Nazi regime's ideology. In 1940, Himmler himself went to Montserrat in search of the Grail. Under the guise of a diplomatic mission, Himmler visited Spain and made a detour to Montserrat. His visit was part of a broader plan to forge alliances with Francisco Franco's regime, but also provided a convenient cover for his esoteric interests. While in Montserrat, Himmler was escorted through the monastery and shown various religious artifacts. However, the primary purpose of his visit was to probe for information and clues about the Grail. Himmler met with various ecclesiastical figures, pressing them for details about the monastery's history and any secrets it might hold which could lead to the Grail. Despite the solemn and historic setting, the expedition bore no fruit in terms of finding the Grail or any significant artifacts related to it. The monks of Montserrat, wary of Himmler's reputation and the Nazi connection, provided little in the way of useful information. The excursion revealed the limits of Himmler's quest for supernatural artifacts, steeped more in fantastical thinking than in practical outcomes. The legend of the Holy Grail has endured through the centuries. After the fall of the Third Reich, many theories and speculative narratives have surrounded the Cathars, the Crusaders, and the Holy Grail itself. Among the most impactful of these modern interpretations is the controversial hypothesis presented in The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, a book that proposes a radically different understanding of the Grail myth, one that shifts from mystical Christian relic to an explosive, familial secret. Published in 1982 by Michael Bajan, Richard Lee, and Henry Lincoln, The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail posits that the Holy Grail is not a physical chalice, but a metaphor for the royal bloodline of Jesus Christ, purportedly preserved through his marriage to Mary Magdalene. This thesis suggests that the Cathars were among the keepers of this secret. The book further claims that after the suppression of the Cathars, the Knights Templar, a military order founded during the Crusades, continued to guard this profound secret. The narrative framework laid out in the book was so gripping that it heavily inspired Dan Brown's 2003 novel, The Da Vinci Code. Despite extensive quests and investigations, the true essence of the Holy Grail, along with its exact location, continues to elude historians and adventurers alike. The myriad legends surrounding the Grail only add layers to its mystery, ensuring it remains one of the most captivating enigmas in human history. The Mauern Discovery. The most significant prehistoric discovery by the Ahnenerbe occurred in the southern Jura Mountains of Bavaria, within the secluded confines of the Mauern Cave. This cavern, nestled in a region steeped in myth and ancient allure, revealed a treasure trove of archaeological artifacts that provided unprecedented insights into Paleolithic life in Europe. It all started with Rudolf Rüdiger Schmidt, a notable prehistoric archaeologist in Germany, whose work significantly shaped the understanding of Paleolithic Europe. R.R. Schmidt first gained recognition for his work on the Aurignacian culture, a key Paleolithic culture identified with the first modern humans in Europe. His discoveries and methodologies set the stage for a modern approach to archaeology in Germany, focusing on meticulous stratigraphic analysis and a comprehensive approach to site excavation. Schmidt's reputation as a thorough and dedicated scholar earned him the leadership of the Mauern cave excavations when the site was identified by the Ahnenerbe as having significant potential to reveal insights about early human history. The organization, founded by Heinrich Himmler and dedicated to validating the historical and cultural superiority of the Aryan race through archaeology and anthropology, provided resources that were scarce in the academic community due to the economic pressures of the time. This backing by the Ahnenerbe allowed Schmidt to undertake comprehensive excavations at the cave, which promised to unveil a part of human history that was poorly understood. Under Schmidt's supervision, the Mauern cave excavations revealed multiple layers of occupation, with each layer offering a snapshot of the technological and cultural practices of its era. His team uncovered tools, art, and human remains that painted a vivid picture of life during the Upper Paleolithic. Schmidt's approach was methodical and aimed at ensuring that the excavation did not just serve the propaganda purposes of the Nazis, but also adhered to scientific principles. He meticulously documented the stratigraphy and context of finds, which was crucial for later reinterpretations of the site's significance. Despite the scientific rigor Schmidt applied to his work, his association with the Ahnenerbe meant that the findings were used by the Nazi regime to promote their ideological agenda. Schmidt, like many other scientists of his time, found himself in a complex position, balancing professional integrity and the increasingly invasive demands of Nazi politics. His involvement with the Ahnenerbe, while initially a means to pursue genuine archaeological inquiry, became problematic as the regime sought to use archaeological narratives to bolster their racial ideologies. In fall 1937, Dr. Asien Boehmers, a Frisian archaeologist who applied to the SS Excavations Department earlier that year, took over the excavation. He made significant discoveries that included mammoth bones, beads crafted from mammoth ivory, and well-crafted stone tools. These finds were attributed to the Cro-Magnon people, modern humans who are named after the Cro-Magnon rock shelter in France, where their skeletal remains were first discovered in 1868. Boehmers postulated that these Cro-Magnon people, known for their anatomical and cognitive modernity, originated in Germany. This theory aligned well with the ultranationalist views of Heinrich Himmler and others in the Nazi regime, who regarded Germany as the cradle of human civilization and advancement. However, Boehmers's conclusions were controversial and diverged from the consensus among most prehistorians of the time, who believed that Cro-Magnon people originated to the east of Germany, a view that is still held in contemporary archaeology. Additionally, Boehmer's belief that Cro-Magnon people evolved from Neanderthals conflicted directly with Himmler's views, which did not support any evolutionary link between modern humans and Neanderthals. This put Boehmers in a precarious position as he tried to navigate the fraught intersection of science and ideology. Faced with the challenge of reconciling his scientific findings with the political expectations of Nazi leaders, Boehmers communicated in 1939 with Wolfram Sievers, the managing director of the Ahnenerbe. In his correspondence, Boehmers professed alignment with the ideological stances of the Reichsführer and the Ahnenerbe on human evolution. This statement was likely a strategic move to maintain his standing and continue his research under the auspices of the Nazi regime, which controlled the resources and institutional support necessary for his work. Post-World War II archaeological activities at Mauern Cave have continued to unearth significant findings that deepen our understanding of early human history in the region. Notably, the discovery of the Venus of Mauern, also known as the Rot von Mauern, marks a standout find from the site. This Venus figurine, found in 1948 and dating back approximately 27,000 years, is crafted from limestone and colored with red ochre. It was uncovered by Lothar Zatz during his excavations that spanned several periods from the late 1940s through to the mid-1970s. These excavations revealed a rich array of artifacts and environmental data, including bone fragments from mammoths, cave bears, woolly rhinoceroses, reindeer, and other fauna. Additionally, high-quality leaf-shaped points typical of Neanderthal Mousterian tools were found, suggesting a long period of habitation by Neanderthal groups prior to Cro-Magnon occupation. The Witches of Karelia. In the mid-1930s, the Ahnenerbe started an expedition to the Carelian region between Finland and Russia, led by Yrjö von Grönhagen, a Finnish nobleman and scholar. Von Grönhagen's interest in Karelia was piqued by the Kalevala, the Finnish national epic that was believed to hold remnants of ancient Nordic legends and possibly a lost Aryan culture. Born in St. Petersburg to an officer of the Imperial Russian Army, Grönhagen's family fled to Finland following the October Revolution of 1917, settling in the town of Viipuri. After graduating from the University of Helsinki, Grönhagen furthered his studies at the Sorbonne in Paris. It was during his unique hike from Paris to Helsinki, where he practiced practical sociology by collecting greetings in his diary from those he met, that Grönhagen's path took a significant turn. This journey led him to Germany, where his articles on the Finnish Kalevala caught the attention of influential Nazis, including Himmler himself. The Kalevala was compiled from ancient oral folklore and mythology, begins with the traditional Finnish creation myth, leading into a series of interlocking tales with a wide array of characters and themes, many of which are similar to those found in Norse mythology. Yrjö von Grönhagen wrote extensively on the Kalevala's potential to reveal an ancient, noble past that he believed was connected to the broader Aryan mythos favored by Nazi ideology. Von Grönhagen argued that the Finnish people, through the sagas of the Kalevala, were descendants of ancient Proto-Aryans. This notion was particularly appealing to Himmler and the Nazi leadership, who were obsessed with ancient history and mythology as a means to legitimize their racial policies. The epic, with its themes of magic, heroic deeds, and a mystical connection to nature, provided a culturally rich tapestry that the Nazis could use to link the Finns, and by extension, other Nordic peoples, to the Aryan race. After publishing his thoughts, von Grönhagen caught the attention of Heinrich Himmler, who was deeply engrossed in mythological research with an agenda to affirm the supremacy of the Aryan race. Himmler's fascination with these ancient tales led him to sanction the Carelian Expedition, tasked with documenting pagan practices and folklore that could support Nazi ideologies of racial purity and historical dominance. But that's not all. This region, seemingly frozen in time, was steeped in legends of witches and sorcerers who could perform dark magic. The expedition, under the leadership of Grönhagen, departed in June 1936. He was accompanied by Fritz Bose, a Nazi musicologist, and a Finnish illustrator named Ola Forsell. One of the expedition's first successes was with an old traditional bard singer named Teimo Lipitse, whose mastery of the kantele, an ancient stringed instrument, fascinated Himmler. Remarkably, Teimo Lipitse knew a song that bore a striking resemblance to one found in the Kalevala, even though he had no knowledge of the book itself. This fueled Himmler's belief that the Finns and Germans were once one nation, descendants of the great Aryans he imagined ruled the world. Teimo Lipitse was a man who lived remotely, secluded from the bustling advances of modern civilization, his life rhythms attuned to the natural world around him. Nestled in the dense forests of Karelia, his cottage was a living museum of ancient Carelian culture, filled with artifacts and instruments that echoed the region's pagan past. The kantele, played by Teimo, was particularly significant for the expedition. This stringed instrument, believed to be of great antiquity, held a special place in Carelian musical traditions. Its sounds were thought to mimic the natural harmonies of the forest, from the whisper of the wind through the trees to the gentle flow of rivers. Armed with state-of-the-art German recording equipment, the team meticulously documented Teimo's performances. Convinced of the instrument's ancient Germanic origins, Himmler ordered several kanteles for the SS to study. It is also reported that Himmler even kept a picture of Teimo in his study. Later, in Tolvajärvi, the team photographed and recorded Hannes Vornanen, another traditional bard singer. The team was eager to document Vornanen's performances, hoping to capture the essence of Carelian musical tradition as authentically as possible. They recorded several of his performances, focusing particularly on his use of the kantele, which he played with a virtuosity that breathed life into the ancient melodies. Perhaps the most mysterious encounter of the expedition was not with a bard, but with an actual pagan Finnish witch that, according to the locals, could perform dark magic and summon spirits. Miron Aku lived in a modest hut, surrounded by the lush wilderness that seemed to echo her connection to the ancient world. When the team led by Uriel von Gronhagen arrived, they found her foraging for mushrooms near her home. According to local lore, Miron Aku was not only skilled in herbalism, but also possessed the rare ability to communicate with the spirit world, a talent that had long positioned her as a bridge between the villagers and their ancestral past. Gronhagen and his team were both taken aback and intrigued when Miron Aku greeted them with a chilling revelation. She had foreseen their arrival 3 days before they came. This foreknowledge lent an air of inevitability and mysticism to the encounter, reinforcing her status as a true seer. She told them that she knew they were coming, and that they were coming to steal her powers. Gronhagen was fascinated by her, and he believed she was one of these famed ancient pagan witches lost in time in the depths of the Carelian forest. The team persuaded her to perform a ritual for the camera and tape recorder in which she could summon the spirits of ancestors and divine future events. Persuaded by Gronhagen, Miron Aku agreed to perform a ritual for the camera and tape recorder, which was unprecedented. The ritual was designed to summon the spirits of her ancestors and divine future events. As the ceremony commenced, the atmosphere was charged with a palpable tension, the air thick with the smoke of burning herbs and the haunting sounds of her chanting. The team documented every moment, captivated by the authenticity and power of the experience. The recording of the ritual was not without its consequences. When Miron Aku listened to the recording of her sacred chants and rituals on tape, a technology she never knew existed, she was shocked. Her prophecy that these strange men will steal her powers was fulfilled. She believed this is a sacrilege that could rob her and her community of their spiritual power. By the close of summer, Gronhagen's expedition had successfully secured over 100 recordings, capturing a range of folk songs, tales, and rituals. Far from being mere artifacts of a vanishing culture, these recordings were viewed as crucial elements of a larger puzzle. Himmler saw them as keys to unlocking the secrets of the region's ancient past. Back in Berlin, anticipation was high among the SS ranks, who were convinced that the distilled wisdom of ancient Karelia could be turned into a tool to advance the ideologies and objectives of the Third Reich. The Spear of Destiny. The Holy Lance, also known as the Lance of Longinus and the Spear of Destiny, has captivated the imaginations and spiritual beliefs of people across the world for centuries. It stands among the most renowned relics associated with the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, akin to the crown of thorns, the true cross, and the nails used in the crucifixion. For centuries, it was highly coveted by medieval rulers, and even by Adolf Hitler himself, who sought it as a keystone of his Third Reich.
Some of this stuff is taken very seriously by those who believe that the spear does indeed have magic powers and was indeed used by the Nazis as some kind of weapon.
The origins of the Holy Lance's legend are as murky as they are mystical. The four Gospels of the New Testament recount the life and crucifixion of Jesus Christ, with only the Gospel of John mentioning a Roman soldier piercing Jesus' side. But one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and forthwith came there out blood and water.
The Spear of Destiny actually pierced Jesus' side and came in contact with his blood. For them, this would mean that it does, in fact, have some kind of divine power. Because you can't touch the holy without being changed or transformed.
This soldier remains unnamed in John's account. However, later works like the Gospel of Nicodemus, a non-canonical text compiled in the 4th century, over 300 years after the crucifixion, identify him as Longinus. Tradition claims Longinus had impaired vision, which was miraculously healed when he was splashed by the blood and water from Christ's wound. Realizing the true nature of Jesus, Longinus converted to Christianity. He is even believed to be the same centurion mentioned in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, who declared, "Truly, this was the Son of God." Over time, Longinus was venerated as a saint, and the spear he used became a relic believed to possess supernatural powers. Over the centuries, the Holy Lance became more than a relic. It became a symbol of divine right and conquest. Legend stated that whoever wielded it would be victorious in battle and have the power to shape the world's destiny. But should they mistreat the spear, it would bring about their doom. This belief influenced figures like Charlamagne, who was crowned Holy Roman Emperor in 800 AD after years of victorious campaigns where he reportedly carried the spear. For 25 years, Charlemagne had destroyed all his enemies and expanded the borders of his empire. In each battle, he had carried the Spear of Destiny. According to legend, he dropped the spear while crossing a stream in January 814, and mysteriously, days later, Charlemagne died. Many believed his death was caused by his mistreat of the spear. Throughout the Middle Ages, the spear exchanged hands among Europe's most powerful rulers, who were ready to do anything to possess the spear. In the 10th century, King Henry the Fowler, a Frankish king, traded the strategically significant Basel region in Switzerland with King Rudolph II of Burgundy in return for the Spear of Destiny. Henry used this acquisition to significantly expand his territories, conquering the Lotharingians and Danes to the north and the Magyars and Slavs to the east. He is celebrated as the founder of Germany, and initiated a long line of Holy Roman emperors who retained control of the Spear of Destiny, symbolizing their dominion over a rapidly expanding empire. Henry's great-grandson, Otto III, later fused the spear with another sacred artifact from the crucifixion, a holy nail that had pierced the body of Christ. Following this consolidation of holy relics, Otto III's reign further emphasized the sanctity and divine right of the Holy Roman Emperors. In the mid-14th century, Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV adorned the blade of the Spear of Destiny with a golden sleeve, marking it with the inscription Lancea et clavis Domini, the lance and nail of the Lord. A century later, in 1424, Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund had transferred this spear, along with other sacred relics, to Nuremberg, issuing a decree that they should remain there indefinitely. However, history would not honor Sigismund's decree. Years later, in 1912, the spear was still housed at the Hofburg Palace, where it caught the eye of a young artist. This artist, deeply moved by a performance of Richard Wagner's opera Parsifal, where the spear is integral to the drama, vowed to one day claim the artifact for himself. That artist was none other than Adolf Hitler, whose future would be inextricably linked to the legacy and mythos of the Spear of Destiny. In 1938, the Nazis annexed Austria into the Third Reich. This bold move was part of Adolf Hitler's larger vision of uniting all German-speaking people under one expansive Reich. It was then that Hitler ensured that the Spear of Destiny was taken from the Hofburg Palace and transported to Nuremberg, a city imbued with historical and symbolic significance to the Nazi Party. Nuremberg was not only the site of grand Nazi rallies, but also steeped in imperial history, having once been a major seat of the Holy Roman Empire. By placing the spear there, Hitler sought to evoke the grandeur of past empires and align the Third Reich with a lineage of power stretching back centuries. The spear became a feature in Nazi displays, paraded as a talisman that signified Germany's rightful dominion and the divine legitimacy of their rule. However, some believe that Hitler's interest in the spear was only for his symbolic value. Heinrich Himmler was the man who was more influenced by the esoteric and occult beliefs, which were woven into the fabric of Nazi ideology, and he was the man that believed most in the spear's supernatural powers. In fact, Himmler even believed he was the reincarnation of Henry the Fowler and conducting obscure SS rituals with the spear. Yet, despite possessing the spear, the Nazis did not wield it in battle as Charlemagne or other medieval kings supposedly had. Some historians argue that Hitler, despite being raised Catholic, was deeply cynical about Christianity and viewed it as incompatible with his vision for the Aryan state. As World War II raged on, the spear was stored in a fortified bunker in Nuremberg to protect it from Allied bombings. However, as the war turned against Germany and the Allied forces closed in, panic and disarray swept through the Nazi leadership. When the Allies entered Berlin, they found the Spear of Destiny abandoned and neglected by the Nazis. The date they found it was April 30th, 1945, the same day Hitler died. Whether by accident or fate, the Allies reclaimed the relic, effectively breaking the spear's mystical hold on Nazi Germany. It appeared the legend was true. Whoever possessed the Spear of Destiny would rule the world, but losing it would bring about their destruction. With the spear no longer under Nazi control, the supposed divine favor that had protected Hitler's regime was gone. The subsequent surrender of Germany and the complete collapse of the Third Reich followed swiftly, reinforcing the story's dramatic impact. However, this was just a story. As with many legends, the truth diverges from the myth. During the Second World War, the Spear of Destiny was actually secured in a specially constructed bunker beneath Nuremberg. When Allied forces finally stormed Nuremberg, they discovered the hidden bunker. However, to their surprise, the Spear of Destiny was not there. Unknown to them at the time, Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS and an avid believer in the occult, had ordered the spear to be moved and hidden in an even more secure location. Himmler intended for the relic to be a cornerstone for a potential resurgence of the Nazi regime, in his view, reverse Germany's crushing defeat. After months of Allied occupation and the crumbling of Nazi resolve, the secret finally came to light. Those responsible for hiding the spear, no longer willing or able to resist, disclosed its whereabouts. It was buried deep within the walls of a bunker, 80 feet underground. In January 1946, the spear was retrieved and returned to Vienna's Hofburg Palace, where it has remained on display ever since. But questions remain. Is it truly the spear that pierced the side of Christ? Doubts about the spear's authenticity have long been part of its history. When it was handed to Charlemagne by the Pope in 775, it was described as the spear of Saint Maurice, a Roman soldier turned martyr from centuries after Christ's crucifixion. Despite this, Charlemagne and later European leaders treated it as the spear of destiny. This claim was scrutinized in 2003 when Robert Feather, an English metallurgist, conducted detailed examinations. His tests, which involved removing a gold band that held the spear together, dated the blade to the 7th century, around the time it was given to Charlemagne, not the time of Christ. Further analysis by the Interdisciplinary Research Institute for Archaeology in Vienna confirmed a manufacture date around 800, suggesting it wasn't the weapon used at Golgotha. The lore of the Spear of Destiny is compounded by the existence of several spears across Europe, each claimed to have touched divine history: Constantinople, Paris, Echmiadzin, Antioch, and beneath St. Peter's Basilica. The Vatican's relic, believed to have been unearthed in Jerusalem, might hold the most credible link to being the true lance of Longinus, despite the earliest records dating back only to the 6th century, well after the crucifixion. The name Longinus itself is a derivative from the Greek lonchi, spear, suggesting a tautological origin, lance of lanceman. The disconnect grows when considering the Roman military's armament at the time of Christ, which would have been the pilum, a type of javelin, and not the type of spear later associated with medieval legends. This historical and cultural puzzle highlights whether these relics were part of an elaborate deception or knowingly used symbols to bolster the authority and resolve of their bearers. An example is the Spear of Antioch during the First Crusade. Found under mysterious circumstances, it rallied the besieged crusaders to a miraculous victory and continued conquest, despite contemporary skepticism about its authenticity. The remote and rugged region in the North Caucasus, in the Kabardino-Balkaria Republic of the Russian Federation, is a place of towering mountains and untamed wilderness. Yet, in 2011, Arthur Zhemukov, who is a Russian speleologist, which is the scientific study and exploration of caves, made an astonishing discovery at the Kara Hora mountain peak, one which would completely shatter our understanding of ancient human history. There, he found a deep, narrow, vertical shaft, seemingly swallowed by the earth itself. It was made of parallel stone slabs that seemed perfectly geometrical, as if they were artificially made. Zhemukov and his team decided to venture deeper, and what they discovered within the shaft was nothing short of extraordinary. The walls were straight and polished, extending 40 meters or 130 feet deep into the mountain, before opening into a wide underground hall with a height of 36 meters, about 118 feet. The straight walls of this shaft were constructed from large megalithic blocks that fitted together at right angles with minimal gaps. There were even large stones that looked like columns. Overall, the explored dimensions of the shaft, from the upper part all the way to the lower platform, span more than 100 meters, around 350 feet. Artur Zhemukov and his team were completely stunned. They concluded that whatever this prehistoric structure was, it was undoubtedly an artificial construction of an enormous scale. They found perfectly straight and polished narrow walls that go 40 meters deep into the mountain. Arthur Zemikow noted that the polished walls made of megalithic blocks were very similar to those found at the shafts of the Egyptian pyramids, precisely the Grand Gallery at the Pyramid of Khufu, the blocks of which are approximately the same size. And like the advanced ancient structures of Egypt, this ancient gallery also most likely served some kind of advanced technological function and was probably part of a larger structure. It took more than an hour for the expedition to even reach the bottom of the structure, which requires extensive climbing experience and endurance. And it's believed that there are additional chambers and channels that go much deeper underground, which are still undiscovered. Due to the colossal size of the underground shaft, only a small part of it is explored. The climbers advanced 100 meters deeper, and they ran into narrow passages in which they couldn't enter. The team concluded that this structure, whatever it was indeed man-made, as there were no analogues anywhere among other cave systems in the world, especially caves possessing polished flat parallel walls, rectangular blocks with straight edges, the presence of what seemed like a solution between the perfect fittings of the blocks and the absence of oblique cracks characteristic of tuff. But how is this possible? How could gigantic 200-ton perfectly flat stone blocks be assembled with such precision into such a narrow shaft deep underground? What kind of technology was used for the construction of the Kara-Hora shaft? Additional expeditions inside the shaft were made by Vadim Chernobrov, head of the Kosmopoisk, which is an organization that researches different anomalies in Russia. Vadim and his team, together with Arthur Zemikow, climbed inside the shaft and filmed the experience for a documentary featured on Russian TV. Chernobrov even mapped the discovered parts of the shaft, carefully measuring the dimensions and scale of the site. Here is a photo of the map made by Chernobrov. As you can see, this does not look like any other known cave anywhere in the world. And here we can see a 3D demonstration of the shaft from the channel of Vladislav's Guska, where the site is placed next to a Soviet space rocket. It certainly looks more like an artificial structure rather than a natural cave. Moreover, who knows how deep it actually goes and what else is hiding underground? But if this is an advanced prehistoric man-made construction, what was its purpose? There were various theories. According to Vadim Chernobrov, this was a man-made structure which was not intended for human habitation due to the narrow passages, where even a child cannot squeeze through, together with the numerous tiny holes where a human hand can hardly fit. He noted that each such mini cavity goes far into the depths where even the lights from the flashlights do not reach the bottom. This led him to believe that this structure had a technological purpose. He noted that the mysterious cavities inside the Egyptian pyramids, which he visited numerous times, were also not intended for the movement of people and served some kind of technological purpose, just like the Kara-Hora shaft. The sophisticated shafts we find in Egypt also lead deep underground, and they often lead to chambers with unknown purposes. No one knows what they were used for, but they're clearly not meant to be traversed by humans, as there are no ladders, stairs, or any other method to climb inside them. There are no burn marks on the walls from torchlights, meaning there wasn't any visibility inside, and there aren't any hieroglyphs, artifacts, or anything else that can indicate human presence or a cultural and religious purpose. It seemed the intent of these systems was purely practical, yet unknown to us. Vadim Chernobrov could only speculate, saying it could have been some kind of plant, a part of an advanced ancient factory or some kind of resonator. He said it could be a device for seismological research or even an ancient energy generator. Other researchers brought different theories, believing this was the underground part of a long-lost pyramid that once stood on the surface of the mountain, which is now long gone. Climbers who went inside believed the place served some sort of ventilation purpose, as they noted that there was a constant flow of air circulating and coming from beneath. Despite all the different theories, everyone who climbed inside the cave agreed that this structure, whatever it was certainly artificially created. But if this really was part of an advanced underground complex built by a prehistoric civilization, how is it possible that no one had ever heard anything about such civilization in the region? Well, the thing is, there were certain people who knew about the underground structure, many decades before Arthur Gemukov actually discovered it. In fact, Arthur Gemukov didn't discover the shaft by pure luck or accident. He had been searching for it for many years. Gemukov was studying the documents and traces left by the Nazi Germans during World War II. Hitler, along with several other high-ranking Nazi officials, was deeply influenced by the occult. These beliefs were intertwined with the ideology of the Thule Society, an esoteric group that sought to explore and revive ancient Aryan traditions. Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, was particularly obsessed with these ideas and established the Ahnenerbe, an institute dedicated to researching the ancestral heritage and occult practices of the Aryan race. The Ahnenerbe, officially known as the Research and Teaching Society for Ancestral Heritage, conducted numerous expeditions to various parts of the world, including Tibet, in search of a mythical underground city known as Shambhala. This search was driven by the belief that Shambhala held mystical powers and advanced ancient technology that could be harnessed to further Nazi ambitions. Additionally, they sought to find connections with the Aryan race, hoping to legitimize their racial theories and propaganda. In 1938 to 1939, an expedition led by SS officer Ernst Schaefer was sent to Tibet under the guise of scientific research. While the primary stated goals were anthropological and botanical studies, there was a covert mission to investigate the myths of Shambhala and uncover any potential ancient knowledge or artifacts that could aid the Nazi cause. In the summer of 1942, the German military launched Operation Edelweiss, a major offensive aimed at capturing the oil-rich regions of the Caucasus, particularly the Baku oil fields in Azerbaijan. Securing these resources was crucial for the German war effort, as oil was essential for fueling the Wehrmacht's operations. The offensive was part of a broader strategy to deprive the Soviet Union of its vital resources and to gain a strategic foothold in the region. Beyond the immediate military objectives, the Nazis harbored ideological interests in the Caucasus. The Nazi occult organizations and members of the Ahnenerbe believed that the region could hold clues to the origins of the Aryan race. They speculated that ancient Aryan civilizations have once thrived in the Caucasus, leaving behind traces of their advanced knowledge and culture, including vast underground cities. It appears that the Germans were very close to discovering the Kara Hora underground shaft, as in very close proximity to the entrance of the shaft, on top of the mountain, there was a swastika carved on a boulder by the Germans. Perhaps the swastika was left as an identification mark by the Nazi researchers who knew they were very close to discovering the underground city of the Aryans. What's even stranger was that a more ancient swastika carving was also found in the region, one which has nothing to do with the Germans. Could this swastika have been left by the advanced ancient civilization that constructed the Kara Hora shaft? Were the Nazis emulating these people with their swastika and ideology? This was how Arthur Zemikow finally discovered the underground complex, not with his knowledge as a speleologist, but with his research into the occult and ancient texts and legends from the region. In fact, he learned that in the North Caucasus, numerous ancient legends about vast underground cities and caves have been passed from generation to generation. Arthur Zemikow believed that his discovery of the Kara Hora shaft was just the beginning, and that there were numerous more remarkable structures and underground cities and complexes hidden in the depths of the mountain. Strangely, just before launching further expeditions in search of these ancient sites, a mysterious tragedy ceased the research. In 2015, Arthur Zemikow was hit by a car, having reported on some important find the day before. But that's not all. Viktor Chernobrov, the founder and leader of the Kosmopoisk organization, who was accompanied by Zemikow in his own expedition to the Kara Hora shaft, also died just 2 years later of cancer. There were also 3 more people associated with the research who also died mysteriously. We can't say if all of these tragedies are just a coincidence or something much more. As of today, there is hardly any information on the Kara Hora shaft or any other expeditions or discoveries in the Caucasus region. The only thing we found were 2 albums from 2017 and 2018 by a man named Alexander Splashnov, who ventured into the region and even climbed inside the Kara Hora shaft. The photographs he made of the Kara Hora shaft are remarkable and showcase the geometrically precise shaft with polished walls and massive megalithic blocks. But that's not all that captured Splashnov's attention. He made numerous photos of interesting things he found in the region around the entrance of the Kara Hora shaft. Here is a photo of the famous swastika left by the Nazi Germans who were researching the area. And here, he photographed an interesting stone, which looks like it has machine marks on it. On this photo, Splashnov captured a stone formation that is almost entirely buried in soil and vegetation, yet looks like it could be part of a man-made structure long forgotten. It looks like the stone features precise cuts and flat surfaces that were artificially modified. And on this section of Kara Hora, it looks like there are massive stone blocks stacked together, with everything below them being buried in the ground. Once again, we can see precise cuts with right angles and flat walls. Take a look at the strange forms of the stone that are still visible. Does this look like a natural formation or an artificially modified stone, part of another megalithic structure? It appears the entire area of Kara Hora is filled with stone blocks that look like they were precisely cut with some sort of machine and probably used for large construction endeavors. Just compare the perfectly flat and polished surface of the block below with the naturally eroded rock above. Could this have been an ancient quarry used by the same prehistoric civilization that built the Kara Hora shaft? Here we can clearly see precise machine marks on the surface of the rock, which were probably left after the extraction of the stone blocks. And look at the precision showcased in this photo, where the rocks are joined perfectly together with almost no gap and exhibit these fascinating shapes. We haven't seen any natural formation that look anything like this. Alexander Splashnov photographed his entire journey entering the Kara Hora shaft, from the site's entrance to his descent down, and all the way to the lowest sectors of the shaft. The photos are of remarkable quality and can be used for further research. The albums, with all of the incredible photos captured by Alexander Splashnov, were uploaded to his page at vk.com, which is a Russian Facebook alternative. We'll leave a link to the albums in the description below if you wish to examine them in more detail. The discovery of the Kara Hora shaft in the North Caucasus by Arthur Zhemukov in 2011 has raised profound questions about the ancient human history and the technological capabilities lost in time. The intrigue surrounding the site continues to captivate those who ponder the abilities and knowledge of ancient civilizations. Some believe this is the ultimate proof of a technologically advanced prehistoric civilization, while others believe it is a natural formation. Like we already explained, many of the most active researchers of the site have died, and no news about it has been heard in recent years. The true origin and purpose of the Kara Hora shaft continues to remain a mystery. If one day it is proven to be the product of an advanced ancient civilization, the structure would be one of the largest megalithic sites on Earth.